Came especially for Sukkot. There's a special blessing that I would like to give you, but the truth is it's coming from Hashem, but I like to recognize it. As we all know, the verses in Zechariah that do speak about what will happen in the end of days, and that I just want to remind you that negative prophecies don't have to happen, okay? So there's a war of Armageddon, Gog and Magog. Are you just waving, or you can hear me? Okay. And that good chance 2/3 of the world might be wiped out. Remember, this doesn't have to happen. And the prophecies, the prophets have come to warn us, to rebuke us, to straighten us out. You want me to turn that down? No. And if we heed and we listen, then of course those negative prophecies, negative circumstances do not have to play themselves out as we see. So those amongst the nations will come up to celebrate Sukkot. It is, you may not be obligated right now, but it will become an obligation. And you'll come up and you'll celebrate and recognize the King of Kings. You'll prostrate yourselves before Hashem. But the very act of coming up, it takes, as you probably well know, a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of planning, babysitters, who knows what, somebody to watch the cats, the grandchildren, maybe not in that order. So those who come up will be blessed with rain. And what does rain represent? Geshem in Hebrew is gashmiut, it's physical, but it also comes down from the heavens. So it represents both the spiritual and the physical blessings that, for those who came up to Yerushalayim or came up to Israel just for the occasion of Sukkot, I want to thank you. I want to thank you all for coming anyway tonight. I want to start off with a little bit of a Dvar Torah and an introduction to the evening. As we all know, it's very befitting that not only is it after Sukkot, but also Parshat Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the world. Very nice translation, but that's not the best we can do. For the sake of Reshit, God created the world. And what is Reshit? Reshit is the Torah, which is fitting for the evening. For the sake of the Torah, God created the world. And what else is Reshit? Israel. For the sake of Israel, God created the world. What do they represent? First of all, in order to know about God, right? How are you going to know about God? How are you going to know that the world was created, that there is a creator, that we have obligations in this world? Through the Torah. So the Torah itself, it's proclaiming, it's letting you know that there is a creator, that the world was created. I hate saying this, something from nothing, because it's not true. It's something physical from something spiritual. It's not nothing. That the world came into being, it's a physical world, but the real world is the spirit world. The other idea is that it's through Israel, through, hopefully, our ability to fulfill the Torah, to live a moral existence as a society. But something interesting that the Kli Yakar mentions about, mentions Israel, fine. The Torah, fine. That's what we're here tonight. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. But Israel. So what happened was Adam, first man, he was a witness to the world being built. There was nothing around. And it was from person to person, called Kabbalah, a transmission, until Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and now through the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which we will call Israel. And so it's our job to let you know. You can go to the Torah, or you can come to us. Or, hopefully, together, the synthesis of both will be obvious. I wanted to mention, interestingly enough, before I introduce the illustrious speaker, we have I'm going to say that it's quite controversial, and this is the topic of tonight. The Rambam says, or seems to say, to explain it, that for a non-Jew, it's forbidden to learn the Torah. So how do we understand that? At the same time, there's different levels of non-Jew. So there's pagans, and perhaps that's what the Rambam means by saying that a non-Jew cannot learn Torah. What about a non-Jew that wants to know more about the creator of the universe and his role? So he can learn about the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach and become a Noachide. Then there's maybe a level above that. In fact, the Rambam says there's 2 different levels of Noachides. One is a wise person, came to it all on his own. Okay, so through his own chachma, and he'll be labeled a very wise person amongst the chachmei u'os ha'olam. But he doesn't get the world to come. He doesn't go to heaven because he believes through his own intellect this is the best way to maintain the world, to have a great society. But then there's a level above that, and that is called, in the terms of the Rambam Chazal, Chasidei Umas Olam, the pious amongst the nations. And this person believes in the revelation. They believe in the Bible. Well, how did they believe in the Bible if they never read the Bible, didn't study the Bible? So they believe in the revelation. There must be these different levels of who can study and what they can study. So for sure, the Ben Noach on the lowest level can study that which is relating to the 7 laws. But the Rambam goes a step further and he says that they can even do other mitzvahs if they want. Okay, there's only a few they may not be able to do. But for the most part, if they do it, he says they have to do it kehalacha. Kehalacha means according to the letter of the law. Going to do it right. So how's he going to know what to do if he doesn't learn? So it sounds like, and then we have another level, which is a ger tzedek, someone who wants to convert and be a full-fledged, responsible for all 613 mitzvahs Jew. So of course he's going to learn. How else can he, the day after he goes to the mikveh? So for sure, it seems appropriate for certain Gentiles to learn Torah. But now I'm going to prove it before I introduce Rivkah. So in Jeremiah 16:19, a prophecy that the Gentiles are going to come to Hashem and say, only lies, sheker, have our fathers handed down to us. Emptiness in which there is nothing to avail. How do they know their lies? How do they know the truth if they haven't learned the difference between what is the truth and what is a lie? Of course, tonight's evening, I guess the theme, Zechariah 8:23. We're going to do a little bit of math. It's not that difficult. There's 70 nations. The Torah tells us, the prophet tells us, that 10 men of all the languages, that means 10 men times 70. 70 languages, that's 700. Are going to take hold of the shirt of a Jewish man, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. How did they hear? What do they know? They must have learned something, either through Torah or through Israel. Either way, because Torah and Israel, God are one. So the math comes out like this. How many corners does a Jewish garment have? 4. So what do we have? 10 times 70, that's 700, times 4 corners, that's 2,800. So in my little chapter, page 300, I emphasize the fact that we, the Jewish people, have to get ready because we're going to be very busy teaching 2,800 people each. And what really got me is Deuteronomy 4, chapter 4, verse 6 through 8. Talks about what the Gentiles are going to say about the Jews. And you shall keep them and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding. So that's to us. In the eyes of the peoples. who will hear all these statutes. The Gentiles are going to hear all the statutes and say, only this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So the Kliyakar says that when they hear about a mitzvah, they only heard about a mitzvah like Para Aduma, the red heifer. So they may mock us, because it's not easy to understand. But once they hear all about those rules and laws and civil discourse about how to treat another human being and run a society, they're going to be, wow, I might want to join or believe or study a little bit more. So I think it's very clear that how can they come to this point and say that we are great and wise and understanding people? It's only through understanding. Here, the next verse, for what great nation is there that has God so near to it as the Lord our God is at all times that we call upon him? And what great nation is it that has just statutes and ordinances as this entire Torah? I think I proved my point. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to introduce Rivkah. I think, before I say, I'm very inspired by her enthusiasm and guts to even just say, hey, I want to hear stories. I want to compile the stories. We'll see what it leads to. But there's something going on. There's an awakening that is going on. You'll read my chapter, you'll see. So Rivkah Adler is a writer and adult Jewish educator with a special interest in Geula and in the non-Jewish awakening to Torah happening in our days. Born and raised in New York, she moved to South Florida during high school. She attended the University of Maryland, where she earned a bachelor's, master's, and a PH.D. She worked in college administration for over 2 decades and lived in Baltimore until moving to Israel in 2010. She and her husband, alone, are active volunteers in the community just outside of Jerusalem. They have children in Israel, and in the U.S. She's a former freelance writer for Breaking Israel News, current freelance writer for Jerusalem Post, and Jewish Values Online. Now, she asked me before I call her up to read an email that she received Saturday night. And I'll tell you who it's from. It's from Peter Rambo and Al McCarn. And it says like this. They quote our verse for the evening. So said the Lord of hosts, in those days it will happen that 10 men of all the languages of the nations will take hold of the corner of the garment of a Jewish man, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. So it says, Dear Rivkah and Alon, it is Shabbat morn, and I'm reading and studying, but you are so heavy on my heart that I had to stop and write a note. I'm keenly aware that in a few short hours you will have or host the public release of 10 from the nations. Abba has uniquely prepared and called you to a ministry of revelation and reconciliation that will open doors and broadly expand dialogue for such a time as this. My deepest cry to Hashem is that he lead and guide you. May he grant you wisdom and insight. Whether you know it or not, you bear the torch for many. In releasing this book, Torah for the nations, 10 nations, you place a massive stone on the bridge across a great divide. In doing so, you help those Abba awakens to be able to return home. How fitting, Rivkah, that you bear the name of one of our matriarchs. May your labors and challenges bear many sons and daughters. You are a fulfillment of prophecy. Shavua Tov and Mazel Tov. Pete Rambo and Al McLaren.
Okay, I had knee surgery this summer. Thank you. Okay, here it is. Thank you so much for coming. And I want to thank Hashem for bringing us together tonight and for making these books available for us tonight, because for those of you that aren't aware, We didn't know for sure until this morning if we were going to have books tonight. And I just saw the book myself for the very first time 2 hours ago. So it's very, very exciting. In a way, I think this isn't just a book launch, this is also a party. Because I see so many people here tonight who either contributed to the book or who are deeply connected to its message and to one another. So let's just see who's here tonight, okay? Can you please raise your hand if you're Jewish? Okay, good. Put your hands down, thank you. Can you please raise your hand if you're from the nations? Very nice. Look, we're all in the same room together. Okay. And can you please raise your hand if you're a contributor to the book and you're with us tonight? You'll notice, Rabbi Poston mentioned this, I just mentioned it to you again, that the contributors are all wearing name tags, and it has the page number that their story begins on. After we're finished for the evening, so if you didn't already buy a book and you'd like to, because you're so inspired by what I'm going to say to you, the books will be for sale to your right as you exit, and the contributors, I'm going to ask them to step over to the left so that you can schmooze with them, and also maybe you want them to sign the page that their story starts on. I am incredibly humbled to be here, to be the one standing here, because there are Jewish people in this room and all over Israel who have been interacting with people from the nations for way, way longer than I have. And so I think of myself as the Johnny-come-lately of this whole scene. And I'm only here because Hashem kept sending me clues. And little by little, a picture started to emerge. So I didn't invent anything new. I only gradually became aware of something that I began to call a Torah awakening. As I said, a little at a time, one relationship at a time. One of the earliest clues happened in my living room. So I was chatting with Bob Odell, who's here. Bob, here. Bob Odell is a Christian Zionist who, along with his Jewish partner, Yiboneh Archives, who you'll meet later tonight, runs an organization called Root Source. And Root Source's mission is to facilitate Israeli Jews teaching Torah to the nation, to Christians, worldwide, okay? So Bob's sitting in my living room, and he tells me that his wife bought him an Art Scroll Siddur for Father's Day. So, for those of you that are not familiar, Art Scroll is a wildly popular publisher of authentic Torah literature, and their prayer book is like pretty much in many, many English-speaking, traditional English-speaking homes. A year ago, he told me that he asked his wife for an Art Scroll Chumash for Christmas, so that he could study the weekly Parsha along with the Jews. Now, I couldn't understand why a Christian from Texas would want to own a Jewish prayer book and a Jewish commentary on the Torah. This was a big puzzlement to me. This was the first hint, okay? When I was writing for Breaking Israel News, which is the news division of Israel 365, run by Rabbi Tully Weiss, and has a particular outreach to people like Bob, to Christians all over the world, I started to hear more and more stories and to meet more and more people. People would contact me and they would say, oh, I read your stuff and I'm coming to Israel and I'd love to meet you. And so that's cool, because usually they bought me dinner, so that was good. So some of them identified as Christians, and some of them had actually left Christianity, but they were clear that they weren't planning on converting to Judaism. Rather, they were looking for authentic Torah guidelines on how God wanted to be worshipped by people from the nations. The second incident actually happened with Bob's partner, Yiboneh Archives, who I mentioned already, God willing, he'll show up and you'll meet him later in the evening. So I was doing research for an article, and I was crowdsourcing on Facebook, because I do that a lot. And I asked how many Jewish people who I was connected to on Facebook personally knew a non-Jew who was interested in Torah, but who wasn't particularly looking to convert. So lots of people knew somebody. Their father's business partner, a co-worker, a neighbor, whatever. And so the comments kept coming in from Jews. Oh, I know a lot of people like that, or I know one person like that, whatever. And this is what Gideon wrote. He said to me, forget about an article on this topic, Rivkah. I smell a full-blown book. That was on April 9th of this year. Tonight, just 6 months later, thanks to Hashem's incredible blessing. That book is this book. This is a good time for me to mention that because of all of the holidays in Israel, we had a really tight timeline to get this book done, okay? So the book was printed locally, and I know that there are some typos, okay? We caught a lot of them and fixed it for the Amazon edition. This is the first edition. It looks fabulous. There are a few typos. If you find one, please do email me. Make sure that we fixed it moving forward. Okay. With this book, I basically drew a big circle around a number of related phenomena that I was observing. They're happening in disparate circles. And my circle said, these things share some commonalities. I would like my contribution to be defined as connecting all of this that's going on out there with Geula, with the redemption. All of the manifestations of the Torah awakening, I believe, are part of the ultimate redemption of the world. And so even though I say in the introduction this is a book about Geula, only about a quarter of the book was actually written by Jews. The other 3/4 of the book are the stories of current and former Christians who have, over the course of their spiritual lives, come to an appreciation of Torah. Many of them observe biblical holidays, albeit not exactly the way I do. Many of them honor Shabbat on the same day as Jews do. Many of them study the weekly portion, and they avoid eating pork and shellfish, what's called eating biblically clean, based on their understanding of the Bible. Now, do they follow Jewish law as I do? No, they don't. But they're moving closer to a recognition of the universality of Torah for all of humanity. Sorry. Some of the contributors to the book have an ongoing relationship with Jesus. Even as they move toward Shabbat and holiday observances, learning Hebrew, studying Parsha, eating biblically clean. As an Orthodox Jew, I would be lying if I said I was 100% comfortable with some of the ways that the Torah awakening manifests itself at this stage. At the same time, I recognize that this Torah awakening is in process. So last summer we renovated our kitchen, and for months it was a big mess. It was completely unsuitable, unusable, not even recognizable as a kitchen, because that's the process. And today, actually, it's gorgeous and functional, we think. And that's how I see this Torah awakening process. Right now, we're in the messy stage. The non-Jews in the book identify themselves along a whole continuum. Some are Christian Zionists. Some identify as Ephraimites, which is, if it's not a term you're familiar with, it will be explained to you later in the evening. Some as Noahites, who you may know as B'nai Noach, some as Ger. And some say they don't know what to call themselves. They're just somewhere in this mix. As I wrote in the editor's introduction, I don't agree with the theology of many of the contributors to the book. And further, the people who contributed their stories to the book don't agree with one another, or with me. To my mind, it's only because Hashem appointed me to tell these stories of the massive Torah awakening that's happening in our day in a book form that these contributors' stories are even together in the same book. I'm aware that there are deep theological divides among the people whose stories are told in the book. And as I wrote in the introduction, and I really want you to hear this, because when you start reading the book, God willing, and you start getting uncomfortable, think back to this moment when I said, there are chapters in this volume that will make every single reader uncomfortable, no matter where they are in the continuum. Even the contributors don't see eye to eye with everyone else whose story is told in these pages. It is my hope that the book will find readers brave enough to push through the discomfort long enough to see the bigger picture. To my fellow Jews, I know as much as anyone that many of us were taught to avoid contact with non-Jews. And for much of our history, it's true that it hasn't been safe or smart to reach out to Christians, especially when discussing theology. So I'm asking you especially to read the stories in this book with an open mind. I think you will be touched, as I've been, when you see the genuine spiritual searching and the price that many of the people who contributed to this book have paid in their personal lives in their attempts to follow God. A few nights ago, my husband and I were on the light rail, and we met two non-Jewish women from South Carolina. Of course, I told them about the book. And one of them started telling me a little bit about her story. And she said that she was homeschooling her children, and she was teaching them for the history class about the biblical festivals, or the Jewish festivals. And she got more and more intrigued, more and more interested, and she wanted to keep the biblical festivals, and her husband of 30 years was not on board. When I was speaking to her on the light rail in Jerusalem, she told me that they got divorced over this issue. That her commitment to follow God and to worship Him as she understood He was asking of her cost her her marriage. This level of sacrifice, what we call in Hebrew Mesirut Nefesh, boggles my mind. Here's another small incident. Last week, my husband and I were meeting with a group of Hebrew roots people who were visiting Jerusalem for Sukkot from Sweden, Ireland, China, Jordan, all over the US, all over the place. In the Q&A that came after our session, one member of the group looked at us and she said this: "We want to thank you and the Jewish people for preserving the Torah for all this time so we would have something to return to." As she spoke these words of appreciation, she started to tear up, and her husband, who was sitting next to her, started to tear up, and I did too. These people whose stories are told in this book are not the Christians you have been taught to fear. I am not so naive as to believe that every Christian Zionist and every person in the Hebrew Roots movement has given up trying to bring Jews to Jesus. At the same time, I see things changing. In this work, I've met many Christian Zionists and Hebrew Roots people who explicitly express a belief that the Jews do not need to be brought to Jesus. I know many Jews are suspicious and believe that no Christian can ever be trusted to not have a hidden proselytizing agenda. This book and the bridges that I'm trying to construct are based on the idea, as Geula approaches, we have entered a new era. Not every Christian is an enemy. Not every Christian professing friendship is after our souls. And not every former Christian following Torah wants to be a Jew. That was another paradigm shift for me. In this book, I framed the Torah awakening as part of the process of Geula. The front cover speaks of the quote from Zechariah, chapter 8, verse 23. I translate a little bit different because, that it talks about 10 people from the nations clinging to the garment of a Jew. People who know me are smiling because they know what I mean. And say, "Let us go with you, for we have heard God is with you." That is what I see happening every day. It's very early in the Torah awakening process. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how it's going to play out. And there's no accurate way to number. I tried in response to somebody who asked me the question, how many people are we talking about? And there really is no way to accurately represent the number of people from the nations who are involved in this awakening. And I would venture to say that most Jews have no idea that there are actually non-Jews today who are expressing a sincere reverence for the Torah. To the Jews who are not yet aware of this phenomenon of non-Jews who are connected to the Torah, I hope this book will serve as an introduction. And to the non-Jews who feel a stirring to reconsider the Hebrew Bible, the biblical festivals, Shabbat, eating biblically clean, I want them to know that they're not alone, because it sometimes happens that they're in an isolated area and they don't know anybody like them, and they think that they really are the only ones in the world who are like that. This book is the start of a conversation that I hope to continue with people all around the world. And I hope that as Jews read about the spiritual journey of current and former Christians who are developing their personal relationship with Torah, that it will open them up to having relationships with people in real life. At the same time that anti-Semitism is raging around the world, Hashem is creating something new. I like to think that, like any loving parent, God wants his children to get along. To my mind, Torah is the vehicle that's guiding this family reunion. Before I introduce a few of the contributors, I want to express my thanks and appreciation to those who have helped make this evening possible. Thanks, first of all, to Rabbi Aaron Poston of Yiboneh, who invited me to speak about the book and immediately agreed to turn that talk into a book launch when I suggested it. Working with him has been a real pleasure, and I thank him for all his help. I also want to thank my friends, Yiboneh Hadar and her sister Sarah, who's visiting from the U.S., Emuna Murray, and Tova Goldfein, who have spent hours and hours and hours listening to me talk about this book and the phenomenon that it represents. And they are also serving as booksellers tonight, so thank you guys for that. And of course, I send thanks to my husband Ilan, who not only escorted me so lovely onto the stage and will come and get me when I'm done, but he really has encouraged me every step of the way. And he has begun... As a result of my interest, he has begun to build his own bridges as a rabbi and as a teacher to people from the nations. I also want to thank the contributors who are with us tonight and those who will be watching the video of tonight's event. There are too many to name, but as I said, the contributors are here wearing name tags, the ones that are here, and I hope that you'll take advantage of the opportunity to meet and talk with them and ask them to sign your book. To round out the evening, I invited 4 people, two Jewish people and 2 not-Jewish people who contributed to the book, to speak to you briefly so that you can get a little bit of a flavor. I'm going to introduce all of them now, so listen if you're speaking, what order you go in, okay? So first up is Hanoch Young. Now, I've really been blessed with a lot of enthusiastic support for this book from contributors, but Hanoch really distinguished himself as being among the most helpful and enthusiastic of the lot. And as you'll hear, he's a Jewish man who's been involved with the nations for a very, very long time. After Hanoch's brief remarks, he's a tour guide, and so he likes to talk. You'll hear from, excuse me, Kimberly Rogers Brown. Kimberly first reached out to me when I was writing for Breaking Israel News, and she introduced me to the world of Ephraimites. And in so doing, she forced me to go back into my own Bible to review the history of the exile of the Northern Kingdom, because she was saying things like I vaguely knew, but she knew them like way better than I did, so she made me a better student of the Bible. After Kimberly, you'll have the chance to hear from Dean Bai. Dean, are you here? Oh, hi. Dean is a Christian Zionist who oversees an extraordinary project here in Israel in Beit Zera, and also, along with contributors Dr. Yair and Dina Yehuda, who are sitting right next to him, they've been learning the weekly Parsha together for 7 years. 7? Yes. Okay, finally, you'll meet Gidon Ariel if he's here. He is here, yes. Okay. Gidon is a former neighbor and a friend whose many, many years of interfacing with Israel-loving Christians opened multiple professional doors for me. And it was his Facebook comment that got this whole thing rolling. So you can shake his hand later if you're a man. Okay. After the speakers share their brief reflections, again, I'm going to ask all the contributors to go to the lobby to the left so you can speak with them on a more personal basis and please ask them to sign the book, because that's like a very cool thing. Okay, and the books are on sale tonight. It's a special price tonight, discounted 60 shekels for 1 book, 2 books for 100 shekels, and they are now available on Amazon in print and the Kindle version. Okay, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen.
I really don't like the word brief, but just putting it out there. It was back in April of 1994, when I was a mere lad. I began meeting people who said to me, you know, I think I'm part of Israel. Not Jewish, but part of Israel. Not to replace my Jewish brothers and sisters, but rather to stand alongside them. Personally, never having gotten high or been drunk, I couldn't understand what it is that they could have possibly ingested that caused that. And it started me on a journey very similar to Rivkah, in the sense of going back to the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. And I discovered what I now describe as the best kept secret of the entire Tanakh. That the most prevalent theme throughout the Nevi'im, the prophets, is the reconciliation and restoration of all of Israel. All the tribes of Israel. The Nevi'im speak about it incessantly. 10 out of 9 Orthodox Jews are totally unaware of that. And it's a very difficult comment. One of my graduate degrees is in statistics. The one thing that Hashem promises to do with all of his might is to gather his people and return them, restore them, plant them in Eretz Yisrael. Now, we're talking about the whole enchilada. The Tanakh speaks about Judah, Israel, Shomron, Ephraim, Yosef. Same group, 4 different names. And Judah. Every morning, right before the Amidah and Shacharit, when we step back, we call upon Hashem to save who? Yehudah v'Yisrael. Now, for those who will tell you that, well, they're only talking about the Jewish people, seriously? Who has the stutter to say the Jewish people and the Jewish people? We're talking about all of Israel. Now, the one thing the Nevi'im did not give us is a blueprint of how it would look. So we're standing across the divide from each other, very much like Yosef and his brothers. You're my brother? You're my sister that I've been waiting for? Seriously? You don't look the way I do. You don't sound the way I do. You don't act the way we do. But we've been overcoming that based on the concept of mutual respect for the reconciliation and restoration of all of Israel. I personally detest proselytizing. I personally detest those who would demand of someone else to give up their beliefs to join your personal exclusive club. Now trust me, I've traveled to the US 3 times a year, speaking to Ephraimite groups across the United States. I've spoken and taught in Sri Lanka and in Germany. Do you have any idea how many people are out there praying for my soul on a daily basis? Just let it slide right off. But there are people here in Israel who demand the same thing. Now, we know, and it states very clearly in Chesed and Ezekiel, that the 2 sticks being brought together will become one in his hand, in Hashem's hand. You know, it's not a common expression in the Jewish community to say, let God be God. But it's time we started thinking that way. It's Hashem that's going to put us together. It's Hashem that's going to sort out how we are one people separated, who become 2 very distinct religious groups, will become one people. But for now, it's the process of reconciliation, of getting to know each other, of spending the time looking each other in the eye and getting to know each other and care for each other as human beings. And when you find out the most extraordinary things. Who likes Ben & Jerry's more than Haagen-Dazs? Who is deeply spiritual and can appreciate Leonard Skinner? This is what we're about. Do we have time?
I was trusting you. I wasn't trying to.
Again, tour guides love to speak.
Bring it on.
I could be here for an hour and a half. Okay, let's wrap up very quickly. In the 23 and a half years, I've had the zchut, the merit, to walk with my brothers and sisters. I've gotten to know their hearts. And like every other population group, there were some amazing, welcoming, warm, loving people. And there were some who just want to cut your legs out from underneath you. There were those who question me all the time, how can you know for sure that these are our brothers and sisters? prove positive. They're repeatedly fighting with each other. They're always arguing. They're splitting off from each other and having nothing to do. They're shunning each other, no longer sharing a meal. When they're Shabbatin or Sukkotin or whatever the term is. And let me tell you, you put two of them on an island together, marooned, they'll have nothing to do with each other. Of course they're related to us! How could you even question that? It's been a tremendous... I have no idea why Hashem threw me into this whole thing. I've asked many times, I'm the wrong person in the right place. I don't know. But I can tell you for a fact that after coming on Aliyah, I became a Moreh Derech, a tour guide, specifically because who else was going to be prepared to show Ephraim their homeland again? Our brothers and sisters are knocking at the door. But it's not their knock. It's the Kol Dodi Dofek. It's the knocking of the Geula Shlema. If you cannot hear it, you're somewhat deaf. Toda Rabba. Thank you. This is a very bad sign.
Good evening and shalom. I'm Kimberly Rogers Brown, and I have a chapter in this book starting on, I think it says page 205. When Rivkah asked me if I would be willing to speak, I said, oh, first thing out of my mouth was yes. And then she said, can you make it 5 minutes? Well, I'm used to speaking for an hour and a half, so this was a challenge for me. But I have to say that I am delighted to be here. It's a pleasure to be here for Dr. Rivkah Lambert Adler, who I met first through interviewing her on my radio show on Hebrew Nation Radio out of Salem, Oregon. And it's an honor to have a chapter in this book. And it's a blessing to be here to speak with you this evening. Dr. Adler is among history's most courageous, pioneering authors who has dared to publish groundbreaking, revolutionary, and the word controversy has come up before, something that doing is a bad thing in any field usually, but in the religious world, forget it. You know, she has done something truly extraordinary here. This book presents personal accounts of this recent and worldwide Hand of God movement. And this movement is dear to me, and I suspect hundreds of thousands of other exiles all over the earth. These chapters were written by individuals who are experiencing this tide of movement toward Torah observance, and yet we are non-Jews. Now you're going to find out what kind of a non-Jew I am, because I'm going to mention a word here and say that we are Ephraimites. I no longer identify as Christians. I'm one of those who does not. But whoever we are in between, those that are coming out of Christianity and those that are getting closer to Judaism, we are a bridge between our two houses. The ingathering, the return of Ephraimites, the lost house of Israel exiles. This is the beginning of the two sticks of Ezekiel coming together. The restoration of the fortunes of the house of Jacob. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 18 says, "This is what Hashem says. I'm going to restore the fortunes of the tents of Jacob and have compassion on his dwellings. A city will be rebuilt on its ruins, and a palace will sit on its rightful place. This is the restoration that's beginning right now. And Hashem said in Devarim, and of course throughout the Tanakh, that his people would be so scattered that we would forget that we are Hebrews, that we all come from one father, Jacob. Hebrews from the northern tribes cover the face of this earth, but few know their true identity. However, Hebrews from the southern tribes cover the face of the earth, and they blessedly do know who they are. And thank you. We need every one of you. The prophets said that we would return, that Hashem would remember us when we turn back to him, back to his Torah. That's what this is all about, the teshuvah. Returning with all of our hearts. Right now, we are awakening from a deep spiritual coma. This has not been just a sleep. We've been comatose. And this again is described in Ezekiel 37. And some of us have felt the breath of the Ruach quickening us. This quickening has resulted in our sudden and inexplicable realization that God's kingdom has rules, and if we want to be in it, we must learn to obey them. This is an anomaly of Christians who mostly are former Torah rejectors, but who are now Torah seekers. And this is the greatest end-time sign of the coming of Moshiach. I am sure that rebellious Jeroboam, our house of Israel ancestor, and those northern tribes had no idea that it would take, this year is 2,737 years since they were finally taken captive, for us to make our way back to the Torah. But this return has begun. Here we are, and more are coming. The most important sign of our return is that we are beginning to reject what Jeroboam decreed for our ancestors, which was to stop coming to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Increasing numbers of Ephraimites have begun coming to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage feasts. Now I want to say something. You've been all rapt attention, listening to me speak, but I want to say something very serious now, and I want all the Jews in this room to hear this. It's a message that I deliver every time that I get an opportunity. For the rebellion of Jeroboam against the southern kingdom, on behalf of our people from the house of Israel, I repent and ask the house of Judah to forgive us. Forgiving us is your challenge. It's your challenge, Judah. Our challenge is simply to continue waking up and return as we already have started. So here we are at the end of days, the house of Judah and house of Israel, Ephraimites, awaiting the completion of Hashem's promise to fully restore the fortunes of Jacob, to make us once again a whole house of Jacob, a house of 12 tribes with enough members in each tribe to actually be counted as tribes of Israel. That is really what we are celebrating here this evening, the return of the exiles. Dr. Adler's book is simply putting the world on notice. We are coming home. Rivkah and Elon, Michael and I deeply value our friendship with you. And Rivkah, congratulations. Well done.
Can somebody say Baruch Hashem? Well, Rivkah, Mazel Tov, congratulations. This is amazing, and I feel almost extremely very nervous up here tonight. I'm humbled to be before many of you. I'm just this little itty-bitty guy from Canada, and once upon a time, I guess it was about 27 years ago, I had an awakening, just as our sister just shared, and it really came just after the Berlin Wall had dropped, and I began reading my newspaper, reading my Bible at the same time, and it was difficult to be able to see all these Jewish people making their move out of the former Soviet Union into Eastern Europe, and then realizing that they were boarding planes and landing here. And as I began to study this, I began to pinch myself and say, could I be living in an amazing time of biblical history? That challenged me to begin to read my Bible and begin to be a part of this ingathering of the exiles from the nations. And as I began, I guess it comes a little bit, I have a little bit of a drama background, so it comes a little bit naturally for me is when you're given a script, first thing you do is you look for your part, and then once you find your part, you begin to highlight it. And as I began to read the Bible in a different light, I realized, my God, there's parts for the Jewish people, there's parts for Israel, there's parts for even those of us from the nations. And I'm going, oy vey, such a thing. And I began to realize that I needed to find out what is the role for the nations? What is the role for those who are far off? What is the role for the Gentiles? And as I began to clarify and understand my part, I realized that we have a part in not only grabbing the hem, as you say here, hold of the corner of the garments of the Jews, but as I began to identify with the book of Ruth, I began to realize maybe I'm a Klingon. Maybe I'm called to cling to Naomi and say, your God is my God. Your people is my people. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. And where you die, I will die. Let nothing but death separate you and me. And that has begun a journey the last 27 years where I feel today I'm in the middle of a Bible story. That's all there is to it. In 2015, we've done many journeys and we've spoken here, there, and everywhere, but we started a journey after a fella gave us 10 white trucks to basically bless the poor in Israel, but it came with a condition. He says you need to challenge Canadians to be able to, out of a love for God, to bless Israel. It's a little bit different than bless Israel for the blessing you can receive, but out of a love for God, to bless Israel. And so over 60 days and 100 meetings and 22,000 kilometers and 35 people going across the country, we began to ask Canadians to be a part of a movement that we thought was a little bit different. And I've waited years, as the rabbi said a little bit earlier, There's some prophecies that don't have to happen, but there's some prophecies that need to happen. And I look at the prophecies that have to do with the wealth of the nations coming into Israel, and gold and silver coming here. And so we began to ask for the gold and silver, and it was remarkable. Meeting after meeting, I've never seen so much gold and silver in all my life. We thought we'd get the broken necklace, maybe the earring missing its match, possibly the jewelry in the bottom of the jewelry box that the husband wouldn't let the wife wear anymore. We didn't know what we were going to receive. That's what we anticipated. And what came was more valuable than the gold and the silver that we received. It was the treasures of heirlooms. To this day, I can't tell you how many people took their wedding rings off in front of me, husband and wife, and said the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that covenant's everlasting. We could replace these rings, but we want to give them into the works you're doing. That started in 2015. Now it's coming from all over the world. We're in this place, and originally we're just going to melt this stuff down, and use it for projects that we're doing here in Israel. But again, we were challenged. How do you take some of the greatest treasures that have been given to us over and over, night after night? It's still coming. Yesterday someone else gave me a ring from a U.S. Marine that died in Iraq, and their child. A few days earlier, I received some wedding rings from some righteous Gentiles out of Germany that hid Jews, and they wanted us to have, they've since passed away, but they wanted us to have their wedding bands, their kids. But we're receiving this, and I'm in the middle of the Bible, so this happened in Egypt. This happened in Babylon. And but how do you just melt it down for these projects? What do we do? We sat on it for a few months, and then we believe we heard from a chef. And he says, take some of that gold and silver and melt it down and make some special rings. And we began making these rings. And we've sensed to be putting it on pioneers throughout Israel. And since September of 2016, we took these rings, some with Jeremiah 30 verse 3, speaking about that God will restore all things. And we began putting them on pioneers here in the land of Israel, many Holocaust survivors. One meeting we did 100 Holocaust survivors. You can't imagine that night. I still, as I think about it, and we've been taking these rings and trying to hear from God as other Christians have sponsored these new rings now around the world to go into the projects. And we're taking this treasure of this gold and silver and placing it on pioneers here in the land of Israel. Rivkah, tonight, I really want to honor you as a pioneer. We've had various pioneers that have, over the last over 100 years, that have helped pioneer the establishment of the State of Israel. And we're seeing miracles happen daily as we walk through the Ben Gurion airport and drive around this land. And you're called. And many of you other people here that are living Major Aliyah, born here in this land, many of you people who call yourself part of Israel, you've been called to be a light to me and other family members and the nations. And I'm just simply here to encourage you. Would you be a light to us? Would you open up your Torah, and would you give us your insights, and would you help us to be who we're called to be? Because we have a role and we have a part, and you can encourage us in that. We have to do our best, not to you do your thing and we'll do our thing, but let's continue with Dina and Yair. We're starting our 8th year, every week studying the Torah together on a webinar. And I have to tell you, I'm learning how to be a Christian, okay? I'm learning how to be one from the nations, a Klingon. I'm learning how as a result of you taking time and risk and awkward moments, many of them, but it has to happen. Because all through your Tanakh, all through your Torah, it speaks about the nations praising your God. It has to happen. It's happening. Those of you living here in Jerusalem, you had thousands of Christians all over your streets. And just as our brother explained, from many different paths. But there's a stirring going on. We don't even know what to do with it. We need to be taught. We need your light. Rivkah, I want to honor you. You are taking a very awkward step. And who knows what it's going to be like after tonight. This is fun tonight. I often tell people I feel like this juggler walking on this tightrope. Not always understood. It's rather lonely. And if you haven't felt loneliness, you're probably going to feel some loneliness ahead. But you know, Hashem will give you the strength and the courage. And I believe this is really just the beginning. But tonight, I'd like to take one of these rings that are really just a token of those from the nations that have given of their wealth, believing that that's their call, and that there are prophetic words that we are not to just look and spectate and wait to happen, but actually to cooperate with Hashem, to be a part of. And so it would be my pleasure I think I put it on right, but the ring says, "Utter Ruth, your God will be my God.
Thank you so much.
Your people will be my people."
It says all that.
It says a lot of it, and if not, you can read the inside, and I'll give you the inscription. You can go to your Bible, and you can read the rest. But God bless you, and thank you for being Israeli. So
Who are you? Your name, please?
Dean Bud. Page 26. I love you all.
Shalom, good evening. My name is Yiboneh Ariel. It's a pleasure to be here. Bemet, Rivkah, I'm very, very happy that you were able to fulfill this dream. I had a little part in it as well. And after we heard such beautiful things from my good friends Hanoch and Kimberly and Dean, I think that Hanoch talked about the connection with the Geulah, and Kimberly talked about the aspect of request for forgiveness, and Dean talked about the perspective of a Christian who Dean is a big leader in a Christian ministry. So for people who are unfamiliar with him, I'm sure that you should read his chapter as well. What's going on here? I think that I'd like to loosen up a bit, and because this is really the first time that I'm speaking about this topic. I've been speaking about this topic for over 15 years, but this is possibly the first time that I'm actually speaking to an audience that is majority Jewish. And so what I wanted to do is to, for the first time really, at least in such a forum, to think about what place the Jewish people, or without that word the, but Jewish people can have in this phenomenon. I'd like to start with a little Dvar Torah. Over here I was noticing it's a pasuk, Amarai ha'azina Adonai bina hagigi. Now, this is an interesting, if I understood this pasuk properly, I didn't get a chance to check it out on Google. It's a very interesting pasuk because it's the opposite of what we would say. It's, my words, listen, O God, and understand my thoughts and speakings. We would think that we would ask God to teach us, and certainly so many verses of the Bible say that. But here it's as if we're saying to God, you please try to listen to what we're saying and to understand what we're saying. Not as a prayer, but perhaps even as a teaching. In other words, and I think that's the connection, I think that might be a message for the Jewish people over here. Lahavdil, but just as we wouldn't think that God should have to learn from us, who are we to teach God? Similarly, I think that many Jews would say, who am I to teach Christians? First of all, this is something that has barely been done before. And second of all, I'm not such a sage myself. Well, the answer, of course, is because we've got a lot of first graders here who are very, very thirsty to learn. And so they'll be very, very happy. In fact, they will be mostly happy with second graders who are willing to teach them. They won't be, for the most part, people, and really people also ask me, I have a website called Root Source, which is an online platform for Israelis to teach Christians all over the world about Israel, Torah, Bible, Jewish history, all sorts of topics that the Jewish teachers want to teach to Christians who want to learn about it. And people ask me, how can they do, what do they teach? I said, listen, it's not such a big deal, because thank God we've had about 50 years of experience teaching Balei Tshuva. Thank God there are so many Jews who aren't religious that we know how to teach people who aren't familiar with Judaism. And it's been going very, very well. I think that people should, like I started my talk here, loosen up. There's a lot of things that you can say, oh, is it good? I can check my rabbi. There's a lot of rabbis who say it's not good. Don't worry about it. This is you're not in spite of social media. You don't have the camera on you 24/7. If you talk to somebody on the light rail, or even if you invite somebody to your Shabbat table, it's not such a big deal. And you don't have to get a grand slam every time you try something. You're just trying it, and nobody has very high expectations. So that's the first thing that you really should do. Just try. And because Vivetta is something that I've learned from many of my Christian friends, just let go and let God. That's I don't have that's I didn't make that up. I wanted to just finally, before I finish up, I just want to say where I came from tonight and why I was late. My apologies. I came from a really incredible event, also in the same industry. It was the launching of the Schindler project. Now, most people in here have heard of Oskar Schindler, and there's a pastor by the name of Rosemary Schindler, who's a relative, a descendant, maybe a great nephew, niece or something of Oskar Schindler, who has been taken really strongly with this relationship between Christians and Jews, between Christians and Israel. And she, together with other Christian leaders, have brought together American Christian political leaders to launch this project, which will be a Bible study in the Knesset with Christian leaders and Israeli political leaders and Israeli Torah teachers. Not so that the Christians will teach the Jews, just the opposite. They are thirsty for Jews to teach them. And that's, and my good friend Donna Jolet can't keep herself from saying hallelujah from time to time. Sorry, Donna. And really, this is perhaps, I always like to wonder, like, really the Ramban, if I'm not mistaken, says in Igeret HaRamban, whenever you learn something, whenever you attend a lecture of any sort, you have to think, okay, what can I take with me from this? So this is what I'm challenging you all with. First of all, read the book, get a feeling from it. You're very, very lucky that you've got so many people who are sharing your stories. I don't think I've even heard so many stories that have been told in this book. But reach out. Today it's not difficult. You've got Google, you've got Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, don't get on it, please. But if you do, then it's not a good point. And be forgiving. The Christians have asked us to forgive them for the atrocities throughout the generations. But we also have to be forgiving for somebody who doesn't know yet the lingo, doesn't know the lexicon, doesn't necessarily say things that, and so many of them are often so much. I hope I don't offend you. We can't be offended so much. Okay, you're trying to say it. Let's first be friends. I think that's really the message here. That God just, and somebody said, I think it might have been Chana, God just wants his children to play nice. And so, Bezrat Hashem, we can get that done. Okay, I've been asked to summarize over here, so I think I will. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And together with my co-contributors, I will be here on the left side, outside, hand in hand, ready to sign your books. I appreciate your coming tonight. Thank you very much. Ilan and Rivkah and Rabbi Aaron and everybody else. And if you are a Christian in the audience that I don't know, please introduce yourself to me. I like you kind of guys. Todah rabah.